Hey everybody, I'm Dan from Build to Explore. Thanks for joining me tonight. Just want to take some time and go over some of the most commonly asked questions on my project Mini Jeep. And we're going to cover a bunch of stuff tonight. So um, this will be my first live, but I wanted to give an opportunity for people to ask questions if anyone is interested in making their own Mini Jeep for their kids. So to start out here, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right into this. And then if you have questions as the live goes along, just let me know. All right, so here you can see the finished project. If you're watching this, you've probably seen some other videos that I've made on making this 1/3 scale electric mini Jeep for the kids. And it's gone through a lot of different versions over the years. I made this back in 2018, and my kids have used it for all those years, and they've actually outgrown it now. So I thought it'd be a good time to go back and explain, why I built it, how long it took, how much did it cost, how much does it weigh, will I make it to sell, what I would change if I were to build another one nowadays. So we'll be covering a lot of that and more throughout this video. So let's see here. I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment and give me one moment. We're going to bring up some other pictures. Tried to pull a couple of screenshots along the way on basically how this all went. So why did I take the time to build my own mini Jeep when I could go out and buy a Power Wheels, or nowadays there's actually the slightly larger mini Jeeps that you can get that are gas powered. So at the time I was living on a very small piece of property. The yard was really tiny, and I had a 12-volt Power Wheels, and my kids were getting to the age where they were able to drive it. But when they were going around the yard, the steering was terrible. It couldn't go up hills. It was generally a pretty disappointing experience. At the time, I looked into sort of hot rodding the Power Wheels out, bigger battery packs, all that kind of stuff. But I am a fabricator and an engineer by trade. And, I like to do projects, build bigger Jeeps and that kind of stuff anyway. So I got the idea that I could probably do something that steered better. I could take to my parents' property and it could run up and down hills, more durable in general, more powerful, faster, something that the kids could grow into. Some of the stuff I really was worried about, though, was making it too fast or too powerful. So in the beginning, I actually thought that this would just be a pedal car concept. I'm going to share some other pictures here. So just starting out, here's a picture of my son at the time. So I actually started out just drawing this out in cardboard to scale to try to figure out how big the Jeep would be and compared to his size at the time. So here I have a cardboard cutout with different pins at each one of his joints, trying to figure out how, what was really a good size for all this kind of stuff. I settled in on 10-inch tires from Harbor Freight. They were, you know, cheap, commercially available kind of thing. You can still get them today. So all this kind of settled in on 1/3 scale Jeep part. So how long did it take to build this thing? It was really quite a long process. I want to say it was probably about at least a year. I can't say that I was working on it consistently, but um, in the beginning, getting the frame done, figuring out the pedal car mechanism. Eventually, I determined that this thing was actually probably it was too heavy for their age to have the pedal car function. Um, some of my older viewers would remember back in like the 1950s, there were a lot of pedal cars that were like this, but they were in general, everything was made much lighter. And I think they were for older kids than the age group I was building for. So at some point it became apparent that I needed to switch over to the electric drive. And that's eventually what it ended up being was a 48 volt, um, 750 watt electric motor with a planetary gear set and a chain drive. Um, and basically, that was geared down enough that I could limit it to 3 or 6 miles per hour, depending on how the electronic programming went. And that worked out as a really good speed, up until they outgrew this thing. So let's see. How much did this thing cost? Um, I think at the time it was about $750. So that included one 4x8 sheet of 63 thousandths thick sheet metal, the planetary gear reduction motor, the wheels, some bearings, um, it all kind of, the electric controller, that kind of thing. It all added up. Um, Electrical disconnects to keep everything safe, switches. I ended up having most of the metal for the frame available, so that I wasn't counting in that total. But I think if I had to build one today, I could probably do it for around 1,000. Because remember, this was back in 2018. Now this is 2025. How much does it weigh? All right. So in its current form, I ended up building it with traditional lead acid batteries for mobility scooters. So if you ever see like an elderly person or a handicapped person in a electric scooter, they use batteries that are 12 volt, and a lot of times they'll have multiple. So the Jeep actually has 4 of those batteries in it, and it ends up making the whole thing weigh about 80 pounds, which is a significant amount of weight, especially for smaller kids. So definitely the kind of thing that needs to be supervised. But if I had to do it again, I would, at the time, lithium ion batteries weren't as affordable. They've come down in price a lot now. So I think I could probably, most of the weight of the thing, or maybe half of the weight, is batteries. So if I went with lithium ions, I could go quite a bit lighter. I think you could probably get it down under 50 pounds at this point. So let me see here. I'm going to share my screen one more time. We'll just run through a few of the components, see if it jogs any memories while I'm thinking about it. So, in order to keep the cost down, I tried to make as many of the components as I could. So you can see here, these are the front spindles. So these are the Harbor Freight wheels. They come with bearings. This was just some tubing that I had, and cross section. This was a piece of box tubing that I cut down. So these become the upper turning spindles. This is when the Jeep was in its pedal car format. So this is a mechanism that was used in the 1950s. I think it does work with older kids. I don't think it worked well with kids that were, 5 years old, kind of thing, or even younger. I guess technically my son was probably 3 or 4 at this time. So here he is checking it out. You get an idea of the scale with him in there. Here is the cardboard template that I use to try to scale out the body. And then finally getting into a lot of the sheet metal fabrication. The other videos that I have go into greater depth on this, but sort of get some of the process. Here I am making the grill on a Bridgeport milling machine. Here's the body coming together. This is sitting at my work. So I was able to get a lot of the dimensions off of Google, just searching the old CJ Willys dimensions, and it's a little bit wider, but it's approximately a third scale. So here you can see the 750 watt planetary gear reduction motor, and this is like a go-kart sprocket, 2 of those mobility scooter brackets, and then here you can see I'm starting to fit up the disc brake for this. Obviously, when we went with the electric system, we needed more braking power and all that kind of stuff. Here I'm milling out some plastic for battery holders. So 2 of the batteries are in the back, 2 of the batteries are in the front. Was trying to keep the weight evenly distributed. Here you can see the chain drive. The bearings are just pillow block bearings, nothing fancy, off Amazon. Here you can see the gas pedal. This is working on the cockpit. I had to lower the floor in order to get the foot room that I needed. And adding some of those switches, electric kill switch. This is the charge port right here. This is I think it's a Hall effect sensor for the gas. And then figuring out how to add a little bit of a roll bar here. Just bring you up to speed quickly. So here they are, taking it for one of the first test drives back in the day. Another shot of the disc brake rotor. And here it is, all the pieces blown apart, getting a sense of how many different components go into this thing. Another shot of that. And again, all my other videos have a lot of this stuff in if you want to check that out. Giving a quick spray paint. And here's that finished picture. There's that for scale. And then you can see here it is next to a Gladiator. Really get a sense of how small this thing is. So a couple other questions we didn't cover. So how much did it cost? We covered that one. How much it weighed? Will I make or will I sell them? I've gotten this question from all over the world quite a few times. And, at least the way I designed it, I don't think it's easily mass produced. I think I could also run into some issues selling it with the fact that it is a Jeep. I'm not sure they would be too happy with me selling something that close. At the time, the gas powered mini Jeeps that you can get at like Tractor Supply or a lot of places in America were just coming out. And that they are a larger scale. I don't think they're quite half scale. They're big enough that an adult can still drive them, which makes it, a much better deal if you're looking for a mini. Excuse me, a much better deal if you're looking for a mini Jeep because you're going to get more use out of it. My kids, they grew fast and they're tall, but basically we're grown out of this thing by age 8. Now that being said, the whole reason I went electric was because I didn't want to have a gas powered vehicle that I had to start or worry about, things getting hot and burning and that kind of stuff. So for the younger kids, this worked out, but, arguably most people wouldn't think that this is a great idea for kids that small anyway. So I probably would not think about selling them, in that kind of state. And I'm definitely not selling this one. We made a lot of good memories with it. All right. So will I make them or sell them now? What has broken over the years? The Harbor Freight wheels that I used on this mini Jeep, they have run through a ton of sets of those, and there's definitely some like quality issues with them over the years. The mini Jeep is pretty heavy for those wheels, so I've actually had like the hubs and the welds break out of them a few times, and probably if I had to do it again, I would find a sturdier wheel. The gas pedal mechanism that I've used, I think I went through 3 sets of those, just not very durable. So, my previous videos, if you're following that exactly, try to find a better solution out there. And I found that the battery system that I use, those 12-volt lead acid batteries, you would only get about a year's use out of them. So, you're spending $150, $200 every year on batteries to keep this thing running. So, let's see, what else would I do differently if I had to build this again? I would say I would probably go bigger in dimensions so that way the kids could get more use out of it over the time. It's a lot of commitment and cost to build this thing. So going a little bit bigger, I think would have been a wise choice. You don't need 750 watts with the planetary reduction for this small of a vehicle. This thing would pop wheelies easily. It didn't have enough power to like roll it back the whole way, but like the kids learned pretty quickly that if they jammed on the throttle, the mini Jeep would do a wheelie and it'd come off the ground maybe 4 or 6 inches and they would get a good laugh out of it. But the 750 watts is more power than what you need. They make smaller versions of that motor, and I would probably go with a 500 watt or even a 350 watt, and it would be totally fine. The other big thing I would change would be switching from lead acid batteries to the lithium ion. I think would drop the weight down quite a bit. And yeah, I think that would be the main things. But they got a ton of use and had a lot of fun out with it over the years. We built attachments for it, like a snowplow. They had wagons for it over the years. So, you know, definitely a lot of good memories. And what would I build next? You guys can check out my channel. We build a lot of different stuff, but I think I would consider doing a half scale Willys Jeep at this point, which would be a little bit bigger than the mini Jeeps you get at Tractor Supply. And, you know, I think that would be pretty fun. And that would probably be gas powered, maybe like something similar to what the Grind Hard Plumbing guys have done with Suzuki Samurai axles or something like that. So, those are the most common questions I've had over the years. If you guys think of anything else, make sure you can always drop me a comment or DM. Hope you're out there building some projects, and hopefully you got a little bit of value out of this. Thanks for watching.